to Big Fish in the Middle Kingdom and the special edition that we like to call Big Fish Side Dish. It's a little something extra from someone who's been on this show before. And if you've been paying any attention to me on social media lately, and of course you have, right? You cannot help but be acquainted with today's guest. It's the one and only Ying Lee. Hey, Ying.
Hey, Brendan.
So glad to have you here on the Side Dish.
I'm very excited too.
I can tell by the way you say you're excited. So today we are going to talk about a lot of things. We are going to talk about lessons we've learned from our new show together, How China Works. We're at the halfway point of season 1 of that. And that's been pretty crazy. But this is not going to be overly kind of promo-y. We wanted an opportunity, and Ying was very happy to engage with me on this. You know, we both have a lot of things we talk about offline that are, you know, pretty real, frankly. And, you know, like why we do it, what we hope to achieve instead of, you know, in addition to just, you know, fame and fortune and all the obvious things, right? But we really want to be able to make a difference and, you know, find some unique way to approach these problems. And so we've had a whole lot of thoughts about this, doing it, and we thought it would be great to sit and I'm going to let her interview me as much as she wants to. She's in control of that.
I'll give her a hard time.
As you do so well. But you got to give me a high five.
All right, high five.
And so with this show, it's, you know, it's very unedited compared to a normal show. You know, if we have like a, you know, sneezing fit or if there's, you know, delivery at the door, I mean, we might stop and start a little here and there, but you're not going to tell. If I do my editing job right, you'll never, ever know. Reality is I edit almost every show, just so you know. Anyway, so in the case of like this, of me finding my way back, I'm not going to cut that out because that's for real. So the first thing that we're going to talk about today is just doing this daily podcast. It's not for sissies. Ying, what's the biggest surprise you've had about doing a daily podcast so far?
Already covering my face.
Is that your way to hide in front of me?
It's a lot of work. And regarding the time commitment, and every day we spend a lot of time researching and outlining, discussing, and we want to bring the best. And that this is the expectation that it comes to us that to make me feel, wow, this is the first time ever in my life that I'm facing this, but I would say it's awesome.
That is cool too. And my way we're going to do this is, we have some questions we sort of worked on together to agree on, and we'll throw them out. And they're also starting points for other conversations. But these first few are pretty straightforward. So surprise for me, copy that about the work. I'll talk about that more in a second in the challenge part of this. But I guess the biggest surprise for me is how satisfying it would be in spite of all the crazy hard work, you know, because, I mean, I knew it'd be. I mean, again, the difference between us is, I mean, Ying has all this other experience speaking and leading in groups and facilitating with, you know, corporate transitions and doing all this cultural stuff she does. So she's used to like in-person tactile stuff. I've done a tiny bit of my version of that, but I'm used to this. I'm used to, and if I said that dumb, I can just edit it out and go backwards. And so they're both very different skills. And so to get us in the same room has been the challenge, but that's been the surprise is how I'm not just saying this because you're right in front of me and can hear me, but I've been pleasantly surprised at how well you've taken to this and how good you've done with it.
Well, I'm very grateful. You put a lot of empathy in this, and I really, really say this is like a once in a life thing for me to express my genuine feeling that I'm still on my way of learning, transforming myself into something that I think could be bigger than just myself, doing something bigger than just myself. Mm-hmm. In the whole period of time, I realized that, wow, something I get so used to, which was teaching. Now it's a more like a production mode. I want the world to hear us, right? We have something really want to share, really want to tell. That puts sometimes a lot of pressure on me.
Sure.
But I hope this pressure transform itself into something truly, truly valuable to the people.
Well, I love the way you put that, and this won't just be mutual admiration society to you guys. I mean, no, this is going to be too saccharine. But honestly, it's the fact is, again, Ying is here, as you can tell, she's trilingual, for God's sakes, not just bilingual. But it's really something to think and be expressive and creative in not your native tongue, So it's a hell of a challenge. So you've not only learned a whole new skill set, which this is a skill set, folks, believe it or not, I have some skills, but you've learned this whole other skill set and you're doing it. It's like if you're right-handed and you need to throw the ball left-handed or something. It's like you're doing it, it's you're coming from a place where it'd be extra hard.
You're making me blush already.
Well, I know. Well, so talk about the biggest challenge about the daily podcast, and we're touching a little bit of that now. But what are some of the challenging?
Are we really going that deep right now already? It's pretty hard. But...
Well, we can come back. You know what? Touch on the light stuff, and we'll come back to the deep stuff as we get toward the end.
Sure,
maybe
sure.
I think that'll work out good. Just practical challenges.
Biggest challenge.
Practical challenges. Yeah. I mean, there's the time. There's the traveling to Big Fish Studios every day for you. There's me getting out of bed and taking a shower at Big Fish Studios.
I would say the physical challenge is not as great as this mental challenge for us, because
Totally.
when we are in the first place, we were talking about bring this show to me. I didn't even expect that because it just requires me so much.
You weren't sure what you were getting. You did. If you know what you know, if you know then what you know now, would we be having this conversation?
But the interesting thing is, it's a fascinating opportunity to drive me to think why I'm here doing this, right? Almost every single time when I feel, that's challenging. Because this topic today, right, we want to present the best part of the world. We have to do our research. There's some angles, listeners from all over the world will be having different views, views on this. And especially people have different expectations. But I think the way we put together is trying to have a cross-cultural,
cross-cultural, cross-gender, cross-generational thing.
Absolutely. So that's why we keep focusing on this.
Yeah.
To bring the best of the value. So it drives me to think deeper than just to bring the facts.
And this is something that, I mean, if people are listening to that show, which we hope you are, or that you will, hopefully this is encouraging you to listen to it instead of discouraging you if you haven't heard it yet. But, this show, although we have bullet points but we're talking from our heads and our hearts here, that show is really researched and we really craft a tight outline. So we know what we're going to say, right? Because we want to not ramble, and I don't want to have to edit 500 edits per 10-minute episode, So,
because
it is a lot of work.
It's
a lot
show,
goes into it. Yeah.
Considering the format, right?
Exactly.
It's like 10, 15 minutes or so is like what we believe this format could be most convenient for our listeners, because sometimes listening or a whole 1 hour show won't be that convenient.
Totally.
So, but every day you could spend like 10 minutes while you're showering or you're just going to the grocery store, walking the street, walking your dog, probably just hearing us, picking one or two tips that actually you can understand, this is the way I can even in the future present China to my friends.
Yeah, and it gives you a frame of reference.
Yeah.
It gives you other language. Even if you have your own experience, it gives you another way to refer to it. The way you say it,
and the way
I
we
say
tell
it.
story, the way we actually to help people understand this interesting example, this interesting case studies,
Exactly.
and even some. Just pick up a few Mandarin words that we try to put out there.
And we'll talk about that a little bit more in a minute. But yeah, that's a thing that I've liked that aspect of it, especially. Mm-hmm. I'll quickly touch on a logistical challenge or two, but then we'll get into this next bit and we'll talk more like deeper challenge stuff. It kind of plays into the, it's more like that's into the episode conversation. So, there's obviously the time factor, just as a point of reference or curiosity, if you've heard, how China works, and I'll quit asking that here. Starting now, I'll quit asking if you heard the show. But because it's there, you can find it everywhere and we'll link it here, etc. But the reality is that each of those episodes takes us the equivalent of an entire day. And I mean like a big boy and girl day, like a 10, 12 hours.
Yeah, Brendan work 18 hours a day.
And that's so that I can do my other job also.
I know.
So that I can do Big Fish, plus I can do, the movie that I'm prepping right now for January, which is awesome.
Yeah, sometimes I feel like I always say this to Brendan, like, while we are actually in the production process, and I always say, Brendan, you're the Chinese warrior. Dedicated into these things, and you don't really complain about it. I would say one thing, which just working together in this East and West perspective, and we're coming from different region, different world in one way, right?
Very much, yeah.
But we have to work as as hard as possible. But in this way, we're reaching a consensus, which no matter where we're coming from, but we're similar in putting the hard work out there because we want to achieve. We don't call that so-called entrepreneurship. It's something we call creation. We hope that, I mean, anything you want put something valuable out there in the world, it takes commitment. It takes so much effort, dedication. And then with that being said, we're no different. We're no different.
This is true. And the people who do, I mean, there's a big wide range of listeners. Last time I did the count and did the check on the service that actually does the distribution, Big Fish is tracking in 82 countries.
Wow.
So that's kind of amazing.
Wow.
There are a handful of, shout out to just everybody, right? If I went through everybody, that would be a long, tedious show for everybody. But I mean, there are people in, like you name the country, maybe not every country, but every region of the world, there's some people listening. So thank you. And for whatever reason you're listening, by the way, message me. I love to hear this stuff. It's fascinating to hear from people about what they get out of it. And what they like. And if you don't like something too, that's important to express. Or just if you have constructive feedback. And that leads us to the question. I'm curious, in your thoughts, we've been getting a lot of great listener feedback. And I'll just say this up front on how China works. It's been really, really positive. It's been the kind of positive I said on one of our episodes. It's been the kind of positive that it's embarrassing. If I talk about it, it's immodest. So
why don't you say that? Actually,
right? So I guess I just said it. That's a humble brag. But we have on the HowChinaWorksPodcast.com website, we have a page we created called feedback, and so there's a form. There's like a contact kind of a form, and that's one way. And people also either they know us or you're connected on social media or some other channel. But people send us feedback about the show, and it's vast majority is really nice and really positive. And actually, there hasn't really been any truly negative feedback. There have been people with some suggestions or thoughts or, maybe more of this, less of that. And that's also personal taste, which we totally respect. So I guess my question to you, Yingying, is how has that feedback, what are your thoughts on what you've heard and how has it shaped your approach in preparing for the show? And I'll give my 2 cents after.
Well, obviously, it's a great and positive stimulation for us, right? We're working harder on this. Another thing is I witness a variety of audience from, other side of the world. And which sometimes I feel quite surprised in people from Pakistan, from Europe, and Netherlands.
That's like with this show. I've got like 6 people in Antarctica listening to Big Fish. So hi, Antarctic folks. Maybe you're at that research station,
And one thing most fascinating to me is those listeners who ever give us feedback are really serious and really curious about China and also are not just like listener gave some cool feedback. Oh, cool! Sure. Your product is your podcast is cool.
That's nice too, but I know what you're saying.
I think a lot of people gave constructive feedback and also gave us, here's my experience. I think this podcast, play a big role, could be playing a big role in terms of helping people to share their thoughts from all over the places on this moment about China.
Right. Yeah. When things are so challenging with obviously. How China works is not all just U.S. China. That just happens to be me and Ying stories, and that's the default framework, honestly. But that's often the jumping off point for like a bigger conversation, which is kind of the goal of the whole thing. And we've had, in addition to all the very thoughtful feedback from people that's been really positive. One of the things that's made me so happy. We had this stated goal when we were kind of figuring this thing out. Going into it, we said we want to be useful for foreigners to become, China Smart's the brand, right? And then also for Chinese people who want to go global and better understand the world if they haven't had a chance to live or work or travel. And we're getting feedback from Chinese people who are either I'm a Chinese who is living abroad and this is helpful, or I'm Chinese and I live here, but I'm realizing that this is me. You're describing and that's been awesome.
This reality touched me most because I am Chinese.
Exactly.
I'm this fish in this water, and I hear my peers, other fishes, talking about how we could better act in telling Chinese stories.
Sure.
I would say, I think our listener will understand that China still needs to work tremendously in terms of telling its own personal, intimate stories to the world, like the American does, right? And how could we do that? I really push myself to a level of thinking this matters to me, not just by, putting my thought out there for the world, for overseas friends to understand China. I also think, how could I set example for my peers who are actually out there? They're having more global engagement, having a lot of more global traveling experience.
Right.
How could they bring this moment of China to everyone they engage outside the world? Why? If only they could pick up one or two things from every episode, know that, hey, this is, look, Yingying and Brandon, what they are doing actually. Well, probably, I never thought about that. Could I even share this with my, international friends? That would be something make me very happy.
I know how modest you are, and I can see how quietly, modestly proud that makes you, and I totally get that. And I'm happy that that's your experience. For me, I've seen too many of my fellow countrymen and women wreck their hopes and dreams based on false expectations, and I've had to adjust my own, which gets into again the back of the show conversation about things. But bottom line is if you're not Chinese and you're trying to deal with China, it's hard. Newsflash, right? And there are a lot of moving parts to this, and so that's kind of mission A, because that's the majority of people who would be listening to this show, and it is the majority, but it's about 60-40 in terms of U.S. China, and then the rest of the world is another. The rest of the world's about a third of the show, and then China U.S. is of that piece. It's about 60 U.S., 40% China right now. Yeah, but different episodes actually track bigger in one or the other. But for me, go ahead, please.
When it comes to this, I want to add a point. China have 1 point. Sorry about my stumble word. I'm too excited for the number.
That's okay.
I couldn't even tell what's the population here in China.
1.4 billion with a B.
Yeah, all right. 1.4 billion people here. If 1/10 of Chinese people, could be inside of China, outside of China, share what China is. Each one of us is one page in this book called China. Yeah. Right? A majority of our foreign friends couldn't really read the whole book in their whole life. But if they could meet one or two Chinese people who happen to know how to present this 1 or 2 pages of China to the world, and I think it will also help the world to have a better life, easier life when, engaging with Chinese people.
Absolutely. And that was our our personal goals. That was our stated mission statement for basically doing this thing. And it's been great to see it, in action, that I feel like we're off to, again, we're 20 episodes in. I feel like we're off to a pretty good start with that.
Yeah. With that being said, I think Chinese people, including myself, still have a lot of things to learn and catching on. For example, we know that in order to better communicate with the world, you need also improve the communication skills, right? When it comes to that, sometimes it comes to the broader understanding about the world. So I think 3 aspects of thinking, our 3 capabilities we especially need to better at. And one thing is independent thinking, right? Critical thinking and deep thinking that we mentioned in
yesterday's, or was that?
Last episode. That's something I always keep in mind. Whatever I do, I want to be able to advocate that importance of that capabilities among my peers.
Absolutely. Right? And that's the growth challenge because of all the cultural history and the imperatives and how you needed to be more. That's extraordinarily well said. And I think anybody who's already a bit China savvy, regardless of having heard of us or not, I mean, anyone who's China savvy has a sense of that. But I think you do justice to your countrymen and women to underline that, because that's what's going to make the difference.
One more thing,
because that's what makes the difference for anybody.
Exactly.
But it's a harder thing to swallow when you have a lot of cultural imperatives that push against that, and so you need to do that. Right.
One more thing I noticed quite interesting to me is among the listeners who give us feedback, especially from the China side, including the Chinese students overseas, right? They keep sending me message and, left a wonderful message on WeChat for me to read. Sometimes in big paragraph.
Yeah, you've shown and played me some that have been really cool, and most of them aren't going on the website yet. But
I
yeah,
generally
I'm hearing some of
read
this
at
feedback.
least 3 times. I read line by line, word by word. I try to understand what motivates them to, first of all, to leave a message for this.
Right.
They must be caring about this issue. They must be having the similar stories, experience, or any kind of examples in their lives they want really to overcome or share. So thirdly, I do notice a lot of them are, like young millennials.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Okay, right.
So with that being said, I noticed this particular generation, right? This generation are more aware of presenting themselves to the world. They are more aware of where China is going to be. They are more aware of how am I going to be able to present or lead in some way. It's not just thinking about, okay, I don't care. This government's job is, leaving to other people.
They're thinking of what's the world they're going to have to fit into.
Exactly. I noticed this, especially among the communities that I'm involved with. Yeah.
Well, and you spend a lot of time. I mean, Ying spends a lot of time. Cross-cultural communications that's like the top line on her, on her basically her CV. But I mean, she tracks a lot in the entrepreneur and the startup world and things like that. So she's dealing with, people of all ages, but especially a lot of young people, a lot of creative people, a lot of tech people, a lot of young finance and young business people who are trying to figure out like this as the world shifts and as the paradigms keep shifting. Yeah. She's dealing with the people who are trying to navigate all that, and they're trying to find the sweet spot or find the right opportunity or find the right way to help. And that also, let me ask you just this straight up, because it kind of gets into something else on our list. So doing the show plus just you doing the show plus your life that in the last, say 4, 5, 6 months since this has all been building, how has all this been changing your thinking or your approach about this U.S.-China dynamic, which is totally,
well,
like
that's
on a topsy-turvy. I know.
It's a big topic.
You like that? Well, again, we'll do kind of this. We'll do the first pass of the salad bar level. Just get a small plate.
Sure.
We'll come back for the meal on future follow-up. But
sure. As you
get the small plate.
All right. As you just mentioned, especially the entrepreneur world, there's multiple centers in the world very active, engaging with Chinese, or just building their entrepreneurial center, including China. We were both judges on this TechStar weekend,
TechStar,
right?
The global entrepreneur, the Google for Business sponsored the thing.
In Beijing,
like
about 2 weeks ago.
Yeah.
And we noticed that people are very fascinated by what's really going on between both Silicon Valley and China when it comes to the tech, and tech, not just like the news in tech, but also how could Silicon Valley and China work together, right? Not just like bring the best of each other. I think that's something drives to me. And also because we're doing this podcast, there, the feedback from everywhere. They send an email or WeChat message.
And a lot of people are somehow engaged in business or trade cross-border. That's a lot of people listening to this.
Right. A lot of them from LinkedIn start sending me messages more messages like, oh, I notice you're doing this cool thing. I want to understand how could our business, all their business generally from outside of China or United States or even in Europe, they could actually be engaged, or they want to know how can we help in order to be closer to China. One thing. Another thing is they ask specific questions like, we want to understand this particular thing. So, for example, how to build relationships when I need to establish a business in China. And those things, as these things keep rolling, and we're collecting as many feedbacks and as many suggestions as possible. We all put that in a big pool of our, feedback.
Yeah, we're tracking all that. I've got a document here in Evernote. My bullet points for this are in Evernote. I've got a document. I've got a giant folder in Evernote full of all this stuff. I got a document just full of these ideas.
Yeah, and that's
tracking them as much as we can.
That really something motivate us, especially from my side. I've started seeing a larger picture of this, what we're doing. And most importantly, I want to be able to know from our audience, how could we actually better, right? Because the situation we're facing. Right. How could you, if you are on the business side, on the tech side, on the, administration side, and in which way you could inspire us more, right?
And we're going to be addressing this. This is, I keep pushing stuff to the back. We're probably just right at the halfway point of this. So this is good to say we're starting to tip toward answering some of these bigger things here. We got a little more transition-y and other stuff to take care of, but that relates to something that I know we talked before, and we're going to talk about here more in a minute, is specifically like we're talking about the season 2 of the show, in some detail, but what you're saying about the feedback we're getting and the things people want to know, again, that's how we've envisioned this from the beginning, is that the season 1 is this, crash course in China, quote unquote, and it's pretty evergreen. We're not getting super topical, right? We want this to work 3 days from now or 3 years from now, like the stuff that's currently, but starting next year, we're changing the format, and it's going to be topical, and we're going to have guests call in. We're going to have expert visitors on the show, and it's going to be it's going to be more of a conversation like this, but with another voice in the mix a lot, talking about the things that's happening that week or that month or at that moment.
Right.
And so it'll be super dynamic, and hey, I got a great question from my WeChat this morning before we walked into the microphone, and this is the thing we talk about.
Yeah.
So it's going to be super current and up to the minute. As far as the question, and I like where we went with this, the actual original question was about the U.S.-China dynamic. I think the thing that's impressed me the most, for me to put my button on it, is that most people, and again, this is, I understand this is not a scientific sample, because these are people who choose to A, listen to a show, B, write us, C, have something articulate to say. We're like, this is again a more and more selected sample, but the people who we're hearing from really, really care. And the other thing, the thing that's getting me about this is the diversity of people from countries, walks of life, whether it's education, nonprofit, different kinds of, old line business, startup business, students, people who, are travelers, adventurers, all kinds of public personalities, all kinds of interesting people who have money at play in the global markets at a high level, like with the B, to small people who are just starting out in the world. We literally have this massive range of people who are paying attention to this and taking the time to give us feedback. And so what it says to me is the world cares about this. And so for me, that's encouraging, because only by a lot of people caring is the relationship going to be, let's just say, repaired, because there's been a bit of damage, but only by all this diversity of people really being engaged and caring will it get to back to where it was and go to a better place where it has to go, right, for all of us.
We know it's a critical moment. We don't need to say how critical it is at this point.
Right. Everybody's got the internet. Everybody can see.
Yeah, absolutely. And so what we also want to do here is call for action. If I and Brandon put over 12 hours a day on this, sometimes even Brandon is 18 hours. But with that being said, we're trying every minute we could in really being able to think, how could we build this bridge? How could we melt down a little bit? How could we actually just reduce the gap between this understanding? Because the first step is awareness.
Absolutely.
If only 7 billion people start to pay attention to it, okay, even though I'm not directly related to this, okay, if I'm just doing I'm just a shopper and store owner, that I could still care and contribute to this topic. And why don't we? I think the most important thing is think about if you next time, even if you work something not related to China, US, and East and West communication thing, you can still tell good stories.
Exactly. You have the empathy and you share the right,
why not?
Story about this with people who need to hear the story. Need to hear the perspective.
The reality is the world is everybody in a very majority of time stressful mode, right? Every day work so hard. Entrepreneurship is hard. So if your words, your stories, your understanding about the world, your viewpoint could make the other person get more lighthearted, right? If they could have more hope toward the future, do it. Why not? Using a few words.
Absolutely. And that's, it's funny because I haven't had any bad feedback yet. There may be somebody who doesn't like it, hasn't said anything. But when we do on the How China Works, especially, I mean, we both have a lot of humor in there, and the humor reflects who each of us are, of course. And Yingying, frankly, is more proper, and I'm me. so
I'm influenced by you.
Well, I'm afraid. I hope I don't rub off too much in a bad way. But the point is, well, that is the point. But I guess what I was going to say is that there is. There is a lot of kind of winks at the audience and How China Works from both of us, and that's so we can talk about some fairly tricky things sometimes that are not always acceptable to talk about in super plain language everywhere in the world. Because the point is, we do want to have an impact, and that gets back to the why we do this thing, and so. I'm glad to do it that way. I think our audience gets it. Our audience is down with.
I think the core here is authenticity. If we are trying our best, I think our audience will understand us. Will also stand by it. I mean, if they truly are interested in one particular thing, they will shoot us messages and they will write to us and will help as much as possible.
Absolutely, and it's funny because we sort of. I think I know the answer to this question. Actually, I'm pretty sure I do because of our earlier conversations. But the question that we have down here is, are you more or less optimistic about the future than you were 4 weeks ago when the show launched? I think I know the answer for both of us, but what's your take on that? No pressure.
I am.
Yeah.
The reason behind this is... yeah, we have been doing 4 weeks of show like nonstop.
Yeah, and we were putting them together about a month before that.
And it's not about just me and you or us being here, being like high self-hying, the 自嗨 moment.
Yeah.
We go out to interview and ask people. Right. We go every way we could. Mm-hmm. We reach out people from diverse background, communities, international audience here in Beijing, and even people from my hometown in Henan province.
But they've been giving you feedback too?
Right.
I've been getting feedback from everywhere, the WeChat,
even from my
Facebook.
mom.
Your mom? Okay.
My mom retired, but because of me, maybe she got influenced and she almost listened to us. Even she didn't understand.
I haven't heard mom's feedback yet,
she
actually.
doesn't understand too much English, but she almost like every single post about our every single episode.
I know she's paying attention. I didn't know she's actually giving it an ear a little bit. That's awesome.
And besides this everyday episodes that I post a lot of articles from my Financial Times, Bloomberg, and all the scholars' insights, and my mom read about it, and she shared her feedback to me in Chinese, of course. So you're optimistic in general. Yeah, I mean, people care about it. People want to resolve this. People want to be able to, how could we understand better what China is perceived by the West and by outside of China? I mean, people are become more and more curious, like how Chinese people are perceived by the outside world. I think it's a good start.
I think it is too. And my answer, if you can't guess, is I'm definitely more optimistic. And part of that, a lot of complex reasons, and they're not all interesting to everybody. But I guess the ones that might have some use to just hear me rattled about for a moment are, it remains to be seen what's going to happen back home for me. But, regardless of which team you're on, I think we can all agree that the current state of things in the U.S. is a little less than awesome in terms of the way that the sides interplay and the way that the momentum is going. And the country seems pretty screwed up unless you're strictly Scrooge McDuck with all your money in the stock market. Then you're really happy and think I'm an idiot. But, if you have any kind of a human aspect to you, you have to realize that all this unhappiness is not good for society, and the approaches that are currently being taken to the outside world are not constructive in the long term, because we're not going to just build up a wall around the states, and this isn't a conversation about borders. And I'm going to get into back to the show here by saying that the reality is we need to be, Ying's metaphor is building bridges, and that is the focus that we all need to be doing. And again, the feedback we've been getting, I'm more optimistic than ever, because as we're doing this and we're doing the research, I have been learning so much from, things Yingying digs up and the conversations we have. And it's giving me more and more also perspective on, the world's been through a lot. And I know this. The world's been through a lot, and we're going to make it through this moment in history, and hopefully this show will sort of help a little bit.
And speaking of another reason why I am optimistic, which actually is because the reality here is Chinese people overall understand more about America than average American people understand China.
Completely true.
And then there are reasons from both sides, not just about U.S. very strong communication and media and things like that, but also on us. Right? China haven't been able to have that that kind of efforts out there to better present China yet. When I say yet, which actually means there's an opportunity for that. And the reason why we don't understand each other because of this information deficit. I'm quoting from Mr. Clark.
Malcolm Clark from Better Angels. Right.
The director of
documentary. She's seen it now. She's been a couple of events for Better Angels.
Yeah, I went to the premiere here in Beijing. I'm so touched.
I'm so jealous I couldn't see it, but I'm happy for you. And
but
I can't
I'm
wait to
learning
see it.
here. I can share with you and with our audience. Here is. And also along with my over 10 years of cross-cultural communication work, I understand the number one thing or principle here in terms of building bridges in cross-cultural understanding is finding commonality or similarity.
Right.
I know something, we're vastly different, but we all human being. When it comes to human being, we are like a advanced animal. So we have our brain structure not too much different from the other, people from the other side of the planet, right? Of the world.
This is true.
So with that being said, we should think about, we have our heart is made of meat and blood and our, our
I'm trying to track this metaphor here. Keep going.
Well, we're not in a superhuman mode yet, but we have to understand this, right?
We're still flesh and bone.
If something can touch me, probably could touch you as well.
Right.
Which is telling human story. Like we all want to have good hope in life. This is fundamentally right for humanity. I mean, no one will come out just say, I want the world clash. I want the civilization clash. No one will say that unless he's
maybe a supervillain in a comic book, but
that's actually in the movie, by the way. But with that being said,
and even they have the reasons. If it's a good villain, they have the reasons.
I guess
Thanos thought he was the savior. If you know the Avengers story,
I believe from the top leader and to the ordinary people and the farmer in the street. In the farmland.
Well, there's farmers in the street. The farmers driving my DD sometimes.
All right. They will have the similar pursuit, which is we want to see progress for human being. We want to have a better and better life for me, for my family. Yeah. That's simple. I mean, if that's our goal, why shouldn't we work together?
And that's a beautiful thought to me because that gets me thinking about the future. And, everybody makes their plans and I'm wondering, how has doing this show changed your actual thoughts and plans for the future a bit? Now that we're doing this and we're getting this feedback and you're seeing, we're still getting started, but you're starting to see some impact here. We're actually getting the kind of feedback that tells us it's reaching people, right? How is this sort of changing your thoughts about looking down the road here a bit?
Well, I'm not trying to say that I'm a little bit, I'm not trying to say, I'm led by fate, but in some way I believe that my divine power has a plan for me.
There you go.
And the reason why I'm in Beijing and doing this podcast show with you and must be something that in some unspoken power trying to let me know that I have to do something bigger than just myself and my family, things like that.
Right.
So I'm on this journey, I think, because of communication and I speak different languages, I think I have a role to play. Yeah. I really want to be able to better utilize the thing I learned and with the experience that I had and put into, a larger picture that I could help with. Right?
Yeah.
I'm not going to say, hey, by just doing how China works, I'm going to save the world. But in the reality, we want to do something.
We got to do our part. I feel that
someone has to do something.
Yes, and if not you, who? High five! I love it.
If not you,
you love the Kennedy quote.
Right?
We've been
yeah.
If not you, who?
No. So that Kennedy quote is something keep me pondering for a long time, for the last couple weeks at least. Remember, I think our audience will also be familiar with this one, right?
I think everybody in the world, everybody who's literary.
I guess the quote. Let me try to repeat. Trying to test my English and my understanding. Ask not what the country.
Your country, yeah.
What your country can do for you. Ask what you can do for your country.
That's it.
I think it's beautifully crafted in America, right?
Yeah.
And I think a lot of Americans remember this.
The majority of Americans believe that.
Yeah. And I will use the similar quote here for my peers in China. Okay. Ask not China do for you. Ask not what China can do for you. Ask what you can do for China.
I think your leaders here would probably like that as well, actually.
I would say, it's not something about a simple patriotic thing. I think it's something like everyone, if they want to have a good future, and then logically making sense to build for a better community, right?
Yeah,
having this larger connected viewpoint. And I think the third level I want to say about this is if international audience, people, friends that I made, along the journey that I had in different countries in the last decade.
Yeah.
I would say, ask not what China can do for you. Ask what you can do to help and change China for better.
Well,
right?
I like that, and I don't know if China wants my input officially.
You're helping already.
But I'm trying. I'm trying to do my part. For me, as we kind of look down the road here, and I've got to come up with a better metaphor than down the road, but it works for now. The reality is that, and I've talked about this a bit more candidly, a lot more candidly with, offline with you and other friends. And it's something that I've even talked a bit about in a Big Fish, with Kevin Geiger. Was that last week? Was that only last week?
Yeah.
Wow, that's time flies when time flies when you're talking to Kevin Geiger. Hey, Kevin. Which it was good times, but basically to sort of reiterate or paraphrase, or somebody didn't hear that. The reality is I moved here with a certain expectation of what I was going to do, understanding the challenges with that, and having had a lot of China experience with Chinese people and companies and stuff in the States before ever coming here. And just the reality of my particular, the entertainment business, quote unquote, has shifted a lot. And the bottom line is that I've had to change and reexamine what I'm going to do. And so that's been a big issue that relates actually to this show. And so I want to, as we're sort of getting toward that fabled kind of last quarter of this, where we left some of the big stuff hanging. What are you most looking forward to in 2019? I'm going to expand on what I was just setting up when I answered.
You mean relate to this show?
Well, related to this show specifically, but related in general and then specific to this show. Yeah.
Can I say
whatever your answer? It's your answer. You can say what you want to say.
Can I say one word?
You can say I'm looking forward to a Big Mac after we're done here. Although you eat better than that.
Oh, come on.
You'll eat a Big Mac. Okay, go.
Peace. 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 和平.
Okay.
I know it sounds so unrealistically, big.
It's a goal. You gotta have a big goal.
But truly, what I really want is this. So it doesn't mean that we could be out of job. We don't need to do how China works anymore. It's just something we could say, if that is the goal, if that is reality, and all of us, including every single listener of you right now, could have a much happier life. And you could use the saved energy to spend time with your family, with beloved ones, and, instead of just being concerned what's really going on, right? Totally
relate to that. Yeah.
I mean, that's my biggest plan. If I can do anything I could see in 2019, we could have that. That'd be wonderful.
Well, I like that answer a lot. I can't. Hard to follow up with world peace. Hard to top world peace as a good answer. I think that for me, on a more nuts and bolts level, I'm looking forward to, and this gets into talking about, our season 2 for the show and how it's going to shift and change a bit. I'm looking forward to the changes in just frankly my day-to-day, work and professional life. Although it's, you get a gift in this hand and you got to let go of something on that hand, right? You just, right. There's only so much you can kind of carry at a moment. And it is a little food for thought. It's a little heavy to consider, because, this is, it seems like because we spend more time with each other than we do with our other friends or significant others or whatever, because we're doing this show and it's such a locked in commitment that we have. But this is a moment in time, this crafting this first season. As we said, it's been even more than we thought, but we knew it would be a big deal. We knew it would be a whole lot of work in what it is. And it's going to be a thing though. It has an end date, this first 40 episodes will be done at the end of this year. And then we shift into a different thing for the next year. So what I'm looking forward to is specifically the season 2 of the show on the specifically to How China Works. And I'm looking forward to all the other world adventures we're both going to be having, depending on the different things we're going to be doing. But we'll be doing that sometimes remotely, sometimes in the same room, depending on some different, variables that are happening with both Ying and I here. But I'm looking forward to hopefully the dialogue continuing to improve and maybe in the direction of peace, as you mentioned. I'm looking forward to,
you never know.
You never know. I'm hoping that, in terms of what could possibly happen, I mean, we've talked a lot about this is, season 2 of How China Works. We talked about the nuts and bolts a bit, where it'll be more conversational, shorter than these episodes, but more of this format, and where we're talking really specifically about a current topic or a thing that's going on. And we often will have a guest, an expert or a listener join us. But also, who knows? I mean, Yinggying and I both have done a lot of consulting type work, and there are a lot of opportunities out there that we would love to be part of helping with these conversations along. So hopefully we get to do more of that stuff.
And we are also looking for help and support advice from our audience, because I believe our audience is always smarter. So they could...
Well, it's easy in my case. But
using your background, because telling us, because we're actually building this, if not momentum, we're trying to build as great content as possible, as much of good, useful information as possible. Yeah. So from your view, how could we actually better at this, and how could you be part of this? I want also our audience to give us answer to help us.
I think that would be fantastic. So listeners, please contact us. Let us know how we can make this even the How China Works an even better show for you. Yinggying, is that what you want out of How China Works?
That's really, I put a lot of heart into it, and I get my heart out. And I think it's one of the opportunities to talk to our audience like this. I like it.
I'm really happy we're having the chance, and I guess I have one thing to say, and that's a great place to end it. So I'll say something and then we'll bring it back to you to end it. That's a beautiful thought. For me, I agree with all that. I second everything you just said. And I just hope that the conversation continues to move towards a more humanistic approach on both sides. I hope it goes back to that approach. That's the conversation we hear. When we talk, that's our approach. When we talk to the people and the people writing to us, I'm seeing and hearing and feeling, not to sound like too much of a hippie, but hey, I got the hair. I get to say this. I'm seeing and hearing and feeling a lot of love about trying to resolve the differences, right? And overcome the difficulties. And just on a practical level, that's the mandate. That's what the world's got to do, right? So I'm really, really hoping what I want out of season 2 of this show is to open it up, go bigger, go wider, go deeper, make a huge impact, and help that conversation and hopeful transformation as much as possible.
Hey, don't forget my goal next year, peace.
I did forget your peace. All right. Sweet.
All right.
Yinggying Li.
Last final
closing thoughts from you, please.
Closing thought. I want to say for you in front of me, for our audience, I really want to closing my talk today using a last sentence in Chinese.
Okay.
我全心全意的感激 I fully appreciate with my heart and soul. Thank you.
Thank you, Yinggying.
谢谢。
不客气。